As a parent, there is nothing we want success for more than our children. As a dad of 4 boys, I live this daily. When they do good, we feel great. When they suffer or struggle, we suffer and struggle. Not just personally, but as a whole family. We do it together. So if you have a child that's overwhelmed with large crowds, that struggles in stressful, overstimulating situation, or is constantly touching things, or not really recognizing personal space, that can not only be frustrating for you as a family, but it can be just heartbreaking to watch those sensory struggles that impact them in those situations. Now, there's no one size fits all for SPD or sensory processing disorder. It's a condition that affects just so many stimuli, right? It can do all 5: taste, touch, smell, hearing, all of the above. So if your child is struggling with SPD, you already know the effects of it. Today, I want to unpack for you in this video the tests and how we measure it. And you heard that right. We can actually test and see what's going on within their sensory nervous system. So that way we can find it, quantify it, and get to work with how to help them. Because if we can calm that underlying sensory system, then the world around them isn't so overstimulating. So I really want to walk you through this tonight in this video. The first thing we really want to start with, even before we go into that test, is what is the root cause of sensory processing disorder? And this is something that as a pediatric chiropractor, I dig into with parents every single day. Now, SPD, you can really break it down into 2 main phases. Either sensory seeking, where they want heavy blankets, they want big hugs, they want to feel and sense their environment around them. Oftentimes, these are the kiddos that are chewing on their shirt, chewing on their pencil, putting things in their mouth, not understanding personal space as much. And then there's the other side of it. There's the sensory avoidance, where loud noises are really stressful, where, oh, please don't cut my hair, please don't touch my neck, please don't brush my teeth. I just can't handle that. I'm overly sensitive to the world around us. Now, when the brain develops in utero, one of the first things that develops is that sensory processing system. This happens because it's so much in this lower brainstem and within the neurospinal system that when that develops, it already starts to, in utero, to start to program and start to connect to what that sensory system is going to look like. So if there's a lot of stress in utero, emotionally, physically, space constraint, that can impact our sensory system. Another big trigger is birth intervention, whether it be C-section, whether it be, a induced pregnancy, whether it be forceps, vacuum. Difficult, tough birth processes and deliveries put a lot of extra stress and strain on the upper cervical spine. Now, this area, upper cervical, occiput down to right here, C5, has so many sensory, what we call proprioceptors. Those proprioceptors pick up the sensations that happen in the world around us, and they either tell our brain to respond to them or to block them out. Now, so many kiddos that struggle with sensory processing disorder, they are just getting overwhelmed with signals. In a way, that air traffic control right here at the base of the neck, the base of the spine, can't take anything out. That gatekeeper can't keep sensory stimuli out, and it's very overwhelming to the rest of the brain. The brain is confused, it's disorganized, and how it responds is to say, hey, I'm scared of it, or I really want to experience it to make me feel more comfortable. Now, this feeling, when that goes into the brain, it's not a proprioceptive feeling. It's not that feeling of, okay, I can understand the world around me. It actually turns to nociception. And the word, that we call that is really noise. It's noise that's responding to the brain. And how just, I guess you could say, like, how perfect is that word, that's what so many of our kids are hearing when they struggle with sensory processing disorder, is they literally feel noise from the outside world, and it just overwhelms their sensory system. So how do we dig into this? How do we measure what our kids are feeling on the outside, on their inside? Well, the answer is looking at it through the lens of what their body is doing, not just how they're feeling, but truly how they're functioning. That's why we really go into these tests, because we can look and say, okay, what is the body saying that's sending the signals up to the brain? So I want to show you 3 tests that help us measure a sensory processing system, what goes wrong in them, and how can we improve them to help that sensory processing system be so much calmer. So I want to switch views here for you guys. And this is a view of what we call neurological INSiGHT stress scans. Now, these neurological scans, what they look at is communication from the body to the brain. So it shows where our nervous system in the body is stressed out, and then the signals that it's sending up to the brain. Now, this first scan over here, what's called a neurothermal scan. Now, thermal, just think temperature. We've all heard about thermography for different things. It is a wonderful thing to really look at for our kids to, one, tell us how severe that neurosensory system is, and two, find out where that's primarily located so we can track it and we can see what areas of the nervous system are struggling. Now, this thermal scan looks at temperature differences side to side, from the right side over here to the left side over here. Now, these different areas within our neurospinal system, they all control different systems, organs, and glands. So stress down here, this lower region, that might be more digestive or vagus nerve or hormonal. You know, we get up here more into the shoulders, and that's our sympathetic response. That's our stress response. We get into the upper neck, and that really goes with sensory processing disorder, because this is truly that gatekeeper to the brain and to those upper levels of cognitive function. So that's the thermal scan, and that helps us really see the localized systems, organs, and glands that really affect that neurosensory system. Now, secondly, we look at what we call a neurospinal EMG scan. And this is probably the most relatable for you, mom and dad, if you've ever been to a chiropractor before. In talking to Pediatric Chiropractic, this scan measures what we look at is called tension or energy. Now, we think of it as tension as pain, but remember earlier in this video, I mentioned nociception and proprioception, so noise, right? Think about this more as that energy or that noise that the body feels that it's sending to the brain. So when we have areas in this that are more stressed, that are more blown out, that are sending signals upward to the brain, that can be very, very overwhelming to that brain. It can be nociception. So that energy is effectively telling the brain to work extra hard, be extra sensitive, and not feel comfortable in that environment. So it gives us a good idea of the regionality of not just the tension in a child's body, but the amount of energy that's following up to that brain. Now, this third scan might be my favorite. Heart rate variability, or HRV, is something we adults use quite a bit. We use it on our Garmin watches. We use it on our Whoops. We track it a lot of times if we exercise or trying to live healthy, but it's actually an awesome test we can use for our kids too. It tells us two main things. This up or down graph tells us essentially how hard their nervous system is working. And wouldn't we want to know that? Because most of the time when kids get upset, they get frustrated, they get emotional, they're tired, right? And a tired body is a body that's having to work way too hard. And so we can measure that on this scan. That says up or down. So wherever this dot lands, either lower or higher, that tells us how hard their system is working. Now, with kids that struggle with sensory processing disorder, this often shows up much lower because their brain is working extra hard to interpret the world around them from a sensory sense. And then it drains their tank. That's why sensory processing kiddos, they tend to be a little more anxious, a little more emotional, a little more on edge. They might not sleep as good. All those things go with sensory processing disorder simply because the nervous system is much more worn out. Then we can look at this from a side-to-side version, whether they're more over here on this side or over here on this side. Now, what this happens to be on this left side happens to be the side of stress. It's called the sympathetic nervous system. Now, the sympathetic nervous system, that's the sensory stuck side. That's when our bodies are so uptight and tense. It just tells us to go, 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 that we're in fight or flight. And that's what so many sensory kids are. They're in that fight or flight. So we see so many kids that struggle with this graphing over on this side. Now, this right side is more the rest and relax side. Now, when we drift too far this way, that can sometimes show that that sensory system has been stuck for so long that it's just burned out of gas and absolutely tired. Either way, this test shows us and tells us so much about how a child's body is functioning from the inside and give us really unique data on how their sensory processing system is functioning. Now, to kind of summarize these scans, these two, this number one here and this two, these tell us where the stress is regionally. And that's important because that can help us as pediatric chiropractors target those areas and help that body be more efficient and more at ease. Secondly, this scan, this HRV, really looks globally and it tells us how much they've been struggling and really for how long. And that allows us to care plan and say, okay, here's the effort and the time we need to help unwind that sensory system. Here's the thing. I love to think about the spine and nervous system as just a fuse box in your house, right? If a room goes out, if something goes out, you go check that fuse box, you turn it back on. These scans help us measure that fuse box and look at it even more intricately as the nervous system is, so that we can turn that back on. We can track and locate where the problem is, and we can find out how their sensory processing system is struggling. Now, making sure this system is fully functioning is the most important exam and assessment that you can do for your child, because sometimes they can't even tell you what's wrong. They just feel it deep inside their sensory system. If the nervous system isn't calm on the inside in these scans, it's not going to be calm on the outside. And it's going to be coming out in the response of stress, of overwhelm, of sensory just sensitivity or sensory seeking. Now, these tests, they're extremely safe. They're non-invasive. In fact, they only take about 10 to 15 minutes to do. They locate that subluxation, that stuck point, that stress in the child's central nervous system. And they help us as docs put together that customized care plan, tell us the time and frequency we need to help that child's sensory system to really release all that stress, start to rebuild, and start to make better neural patterns. So it really gets after the root cause. Now, if you're watching this video and you're like, man, we have tried absolutely everything, I really encourage you to try these 3 tests. They can often be the missing link in those sensory processing challenges. So if you have friends or family that struggle with sensory processing disorder, we would love if you would share this video, share this connected article to this. It just makes such a difference when we can tackle that sensory processing system really from the root cause. We can measure it, we can quantify it, and we can help the body get an easier response by looking at what's going on the inside. Hope this video finds you well and hope to see you soon.